around the same time that infants start to be motivated to be growth seekers, parents, luckily enough, become motivated to be what we call growth promoters, what I call growth promoters. What that means is that in the first months of life, any of you who, of course, raise an infant know that your primary motivation is what we call homeostasis or regulation, making sure the infant is fed and comfortable and not crying and is getting sleep so that you can get some sleep too, and changing diapers and not, keeping away from sudden movements and loud noises, and keeping a regulated sort of homeostatic environment for that infant, right? Keeping them feel like the world is somewhat of an orderly place. What happens, though, is that around the same time that infants become motivated for growth seeking, parents' motivation begins to change from maintaining that regulated environment, right, to acting in ways to promote the infant's mental growth, and even to sometimes provide challenges for them, to add variation, to add diversity, to add complexity, and certainly to respond to the infant's growth seeking. So we refer to this as growth promoting, and it's a pretty amazing thing to see when you look at that change in parents. So we see, on the one hand, we see infants growth seeking. Isn't that nice? We see parents growth promoting, and in typical development, right? What do we see? That it's congruent. It comes together, right? It's very nice. They're mutually supported. We have infant growth seeking, parent growth promoting, and what that happens when those come together, it starts a cycle, a wonderful positive cycle where both parties are mutually influenced. They're both sort of driving each other, pushing each other towards growth in a very positive way, mental and self-growth. So over many engagements, remember we're talking about if you're with a typically developing infant, you're home with them, you have scores, you have many, even in the course of a day, you can have 50, 60 little tiny engagements with that infant, right, where this is happening, where they are developing this very strong emotional linkage, the infants are developing, between their increasing personal agency, little by little, becoming more of an ability to influence their world, themselves, others, and your role as a parent's role in that process. They're really feeling that connection of you being agents supporting their growth. And if you're a parent, you're getting enormous positive feedback every time you attempt growth promotion, almost every time, because sometimes you don't do it exactly right, but more often than not, infants are going to be very excited, very encouraging to you in their facial expressions or vocalizations, very reinforcing to you, very supportive of you. And infants who are really feeling the desire to engage with their world along with you as a guide, they're going to, on their own, they look for new ways to involve parents in their growth seeking. So it's a mutual cycle, if you think about it, that keeps moving both parent and infant in the same direction. That results in what I call the formation of a guiding relationship, that both infant and parent are invested in maintaining their ongoing engagements because they are the best way for the infant's growth to occur. Because when the infant growth seeking and parent growth promoting are synchronous and are working in unison and are mutually reinforcing each other, we use the term guiding relationship for that. And it's a mutual enterprise, as our experts tell us, right? Each person's actions and emotional reactions serve to trigger the actions and reactions of the other person, and it's a continuous manner, moving towards a child developing functioning, mental functioning. And here's Cohen that says, in their group, that says it's not the child's existing set of competencies or the adult's framing and scaffolding, but the interaction that creates the potential. And then one more, the relationship depends upon parents' provision of necessary experiences, the infant's capacity to respond, and the emotional tone of their interactions. Now, I would say that a little bit differently, because that last one assumes that's parents who are already initiating. And if you look at actually day-to-day typical development, that's not the case. Infants are much more involved in being the initiators of it. And what I like to use is this analogy of sort of a guided rocket launch. Here's one at NASA. And in typical development, without realizing implicitly, you expect infants, once they start to become 6, 7, 8 months, to function as the engine, thrusting, supplying the energy, the lift off, and then the thrust for mental and self-growth. And then if that's happening, then the word guiding makes sense. Because what guiding means then is you are taking this energy as a parent and trying to guide it, trying to use it in a way that's most productive for that infant. But that assumes, right, that the infant is supplying the energy primarily. And that allows you as a guide to act as what we call the guidance system, directing that infant's energy in a productive way. And that's really important because that's what guiding is. Guiding is not to get somebody to do something. Guides don't do a lot of that initiating. They do some, but they're mostly being responsive to this energy that's coming and the actions that are coming out of growth seeking. So if you're going to be a successful parent guide, you are very dependent on your apprentice, your infant, in this case, or child, taking those growth-seeking actions, providing you feedback and enthusiasm. And if you watch typical development, you'll see that through their ongoing, that infants, once they get to that age, in the second half of the year, they're just constantly initiating, and they're taking actions in their world and towards you. And it means that you're going to spend a large majority of your time in what we call a responsive manner. And that means you're responding to their energy, responding to what they're initiating, what they're attending to, what they're looking at, because it's productive. And your job is to mediate that, sometimes limit it, sometimes modify it, elaborate it, sometimes to use it as a springboard for a next step. But you're mostly in a responsive role. And that's very, very important because that is such an alien concept when we think about autism, where, and we'll talk about that later, where parents lose the ability to be responsive. But you also sometimes act to initiate, right? But even when you initiate, you're expecting that you're going to get feedback from that child, determine if it's appropriate, and determine what an appropriate one step ahead goal would be, or what you should add to that activity, to that interaction, to make it growth promoting. But you have to expect you're going to get the feedback. And then the other thing that you depend on, whether you reel it or not, in typical development, is you're getting an enormous amount of enthusiasm and positive emotional response when you attempt your growth promotion as a guide. You're just constantly getting affirmation from the infant that, leaves you to want to do it more and keep going. So those are things that I think we take for granted that make us successful as a parent guide.